What if I told you the woman you love today could walk away tomorrow, and it wouldn't be because she stopped loving you, but because you stopped being valuable? That thought cuts deep, and if you've ever felt it, you know the quiet fear it brings. The fear that the moment your career collapses, your health falters, or your confidence shatters, her love might vanish just as quickly. Every man knows someone who's lived this nightmare. The buddy whose wife walked away after he lost his job. The brother whose girlfriend disappeared when depression hit. The coworker whose partner found a new man while he was in chemo. Each time, you tell yourself it won't happen to you. Your love is different. She's different. But deep down, a voice whispers, "What if she isn't?" That's the wound no man wants to look at. The possibility that love and loyalty aren't unconditional at all. That when your value fades, her devotion fades with it. And yet this is exactly the truth history has already revealed in the most brutal way possible. A truth so disturbing, most men refuse to face it. Because if this is real, if female loyalty is tied to something far more primal than we like to believe, then it changes how you must see every relationship you've ever had, and everyone you'll ever have again. Stay with me. By the end of this video, you'll understand a truth about loyalty that can either destroy you or set you free forever. You see, we grow up believing in the story of unconditional love. Movies tell us it exists. Songs tell us it's eternal. Even our own relationships feel like proof, at least when things are going well. She looks into your eyes and says she'll never leave. She promises she'll stand by you through anything. And in that moment, you believe it with all your heart. But here's the uncomfortable truth most men never want to test. Love feels unconditional until life forces it through the fire, until your strength, your status, or your ability to provide gets stripped away. Then you discover whether those vows were eternal or temporary. Think back to the men you've seen fall. Maybe it was a friend who got laid off. At first, his girlfriend said, "We'll get through this together." But months later, she was gone. Or maybe it was the uncle who got sick. His wife swore she'd care for him forever. But soon, she started to pull away, cold and distant, until she found someone else. When you first hear these stories, you want to believe they're exceptions. You think, those women were weak, selfish, not like mine. You convince yourself your relationship is built differently. But what if these aren't exceptions at all? What if they're the rule, hidden in plain sight, repeating itself across history? Because here's the part no one tells you. Human nature has already been tested in conditions so brutal. No experiment could match it. Entire societies have seen men stripped of everything: power, health, freedom, even hope. And in those conditions, the truth about loyalty was revealed with brutal consistency. The answers aren't romantic. They aren't comforting. But once you see them, you can never unsee them. To understand the truth about loyalty, we need to go beyond personal stories. We need to look at the one place in history where human nature was stripped down to its core. No excuses, no comfort, no illusions. That place was the Soviet Gulag, a vast network of prison camps spread across the frozen wastelands of Siberia. It was hell on earth, millions of men locked away, reduced to numbers, stripped of everything that once gave them worth. Professors, soldiers, farmers, poets, it didn't matter. Once inside, status meant nothing. Dignity meant nothing. All that remained was survival. And here's what made the Gulag more than just a nightmare. It became the harshest experiment ever conducted on love, loyalty, and human bonds. Not by design, but by brutal accident. When you take men and erase their ability to provide, protect, or lead, you create conditions that reveal truth with surgical precision. The camps became a mirror. Not a flattering one, but the darkest mirror humanity has ever looked into. Inside those fences, men learned a lesson comfortable people never face. They learned what happens when love is tested against starvation, against freezing air that could kill you in minutes, against the crushing knowledge that you may never go home again. And they saw, with devastating clarity, how women responded on the outside. At first, the letters came, promises of devotion, words of comfort, pledges of forever, packages of food, clothes, and small tokens of hope. But slowly, the rhythm changed. Letters arrived less often. Packages grew lighter. Visits became rare, then stopped altogether, and eventually, silence. What shocked the prisoners wasn't just the silence, it was the speed of replacement. Many discovered that the woman who once promised eternal love now had a new man. Some remarried within months. Some bore children with someone else, while their husbands still counted the days in their cells. Divorce papers often arrived alongside death sentences. These weren't acts of cruelty born out of spite. They were calculated choices, practical, almost bureaucratic in their efficiency. Women adapted to new realities, while men wasted away in frozen barracks. The truth hit like ice water. Love was not a sacred vow. It was a transaction tied to a man's ability to provide value. The deeper men looked, the harder it became to deny the pattern. This wasn't a few isolated betrayals. It was a tidal wave, repeating across every class, every age, every background. The professor's wife, the farmer's fiancé, the soldier's lover. Different women, different lives, but the same outcome. At first, it felt personal. The man told himself, maybe she just didn't love me enough. But when story after story piled up, a harsher truth appeared. Loyalty wasn't personal. It was conditional. The data was brutal. The moment a man lost his ability to provide, the moment his social value collapsed, the chances of abandonment skyrocketed. The woman who once swore she'd die without him found someone new. The woman who cried at the prison gate stopped writing after a few months. The woman who promised forever quietly started over. And here's what made it even more devastating. Most of them didn't just leave, they replaced. New men stepped in. New relationships formed. Life continued for them, as if the old love had been erased. The men in the camps came to realize something most men in comfort never see. Love wasn't some eternal flame. It was more like a transaction, an exchange of value. When you could no longer protect, provide, or inspire, the currency dried up, and without currency, loyalty vanished. This wasn't conscious calculation. Women weren't sitting down with ledgers, deciding whether to stay or go. It ran deeper, older, almost primal. Underneath the promises and the poetry, there was a survival mechanism, an instinct designed to protect women and their offspring in brutal conditions. Think about it. For thousands of years, a woman's survival depended on attaching herself to a man who could provide food, shelter, and safety. If he lost that ability, clinging to him meant death. Abandoning him wasn't cruelty, it was biology. And though the modern world has changed, The wiring hasn't. That's why when a man stumbles losing a job, falling sick, slipping into despair, she may not even realize why her behavior shifts. Less affection, fewer touches, vague words about the future. She tells herself it's stress. She believes the story she invents to explain it. But underneath, her subconscious has already started recalculating. Already asking, is this man still safe to follow? The camps didn't just reveal betrayal. They revealed design, a blueprint running under the surface of every relationship, a truth most men never want to admit. Her loyalty is tied to your value, not to your vows. And until you understand that, you'll mistake survival programming for love. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. In the middle of that endless snow and silence, a few women defied the pattern. They didn't vanish. They didn't replace. They fought. They endured. And they held on with a loyalty so fierce it became legend. History remembers them as the Decembrist wives. Their names are etched into memory not because loyalty was common, but because it was almost unheard of. These women stood in prison lines for days just to deliver a package that might never reach their husbands. They endured harassment, surveillance, and poverty, yet kept fighting for scraps of contact. They faced social exile and economic ruin. Some risked imprisonment themselves, and still they stayed. But here's the crucial detail. They were not the rule. They were the outliers. That's why we still talk about them generations later. Their devotion was so rare that it shone like stars against a black sky. They proved that unconditional loyalty was possible. But in doing so, they also proved just how uncommon it really is. So what made these women different? Loyalty wasn't just about the man. It was about something larger. For many, their devotion carried an ideological weight. They weren't only tied to their husbands as men, they were tied to a cause. Their identity fused so completely with their partner's mission that leaving him would mean betraying themselves. They also carried a spiritual strength that went beyond normal human psychology. Some walked thousands of miles through frozen wilderness just to be near the camps. Others built underground networks to smuggle letters and food. They became warriors in their own right, locked in a battle most people didn't even realize existed. Their loyalty wasn't passive waiting. It was active resistance against a system designed to break bonds. But never forget, these women were statistical anomalies. Their stories stand out precisely because almost no one else acted the same. For every one woman who fought like that, countless others surrendered to the pressures of survival. The exception proved the rule, and that rule was clear. For most women, loyalty was not absolute. It was conditional. Conditional on safety. Conditional on survival. Conditional on whether her man could still embody strength, protection, and provision. That's why these rare examples burn so brightly in history. Because in a world where almost every bond snapped, they were the few who refused. They remind us that loyalty without condition can exist, but it is never guaranteed, and it should never be assumed. The camps didn't just expose individual choices. They uncovered something deeper, something written into human nature itself. What looked like betrayal wasn't simply selfishness. It was biology. It was evolution. For thousands of years, a woman's survival depended on attaching herself to a man who could protect and provide. Food, shelter, safety from predators, safety from other men. If her partner lost that ability, Staying by his side could mean death not only for her, but for her children. Evolution doesn't reward sentiment. It rewards survival. That's why loyalty often shifted so quickly. When a man's value collapsed, when his resources vanished, when his status crumbled, when his strength was gone, the feminine instinct recalibrated. It wasn't a conscious choice. It wasn't a cold calculation on paper. It was older than logic, deeper than promises, a survival mechanism refined over millions of years. Modern life hides this reality. We have laws, hospitals, welfare systems. But the ancient machinery inside the female psyche still runs on the same code. And when stress or crisis strips away comfort, that machinery activates. You can see it in subtle ways. She grows distant when you lose your job. She pulls back when your confidence collapses. She stops speaking about the future when your health fails. She tells herself a story to explain it. I've changed. We've grown apart. I just don't feel the same. But underneath, her nervous system is reacting to one brutal question. Can this man still keep me safe? That's why abandonment often feels so sudden. One day, she's holding your hand, promising forever. The next day, she's cold, detached, already halfway out the door. To her, it feels like a switch flipped, and in a way, it did. This also explains something even more unsettling, the rewriting of history. Once that switch flips, her mind protects itself by erasing the past. The man she once called her soulmate becomes someone she never really loved. Years of devotion become just going through the motions. Wedding vows, midnight promises, whispered forever suddenly. They were just words said in the moment. Again, this isn't conscious cruelty. It's psychological self-preservation. Her mind has to rewrite the past so she can step into the future without contradiction. And to the man left behind, it feels like betrayal stacked on top of betrayal. But it isn't about him as an individual. It isn't about whether he was good enough, loving enough, strong enough. It's about biology doing what biology has always done, choosing survival over sentiment. That's the part most men never want to see. Loyalty is not limitless. It is conditional, and those conditions are older than civilization itself. For the men in the camps, betrayal didn't just sting, it decided life or death. Imagine sitting in a frozen barrack, starving, freezing, already half a ghost. Then comes the letter, the one where she tells you she's remarried. Or worse, the silence, endless silence, which says the same thing without words. That moment became the breaking point. Some men collapsed instantly. It wasn't the cold that killed them. It wasn't the hunger or the disease. It was the realization that the woman they had built their life around was gone, and that all her promises of forever had vanished with her. Their will to live shattered, and when that broke, the body soon followed. They were buried not by snow, but by despair. But not every man broke. A rare few took that pain and transformed it. They didn't deny the wound. They didn't pretend it didn't matter. Instead, they let the old self die, the self that needed validation, the self that needed a woman's loyalty to feel complete. Out of that death, a new self was born. One survivor described the moment with chilling clarity. He stood in the snow, reading his wife's words about her new marriage. At first, something inside him died. But then, in that death, something else was born. Not revenge, not hope of winning her back. Something colder, clearer, stronger. He compared it to watching the last sunset of one life and the first sunrise of another. This transformation was like forging steel. Betrayal was the fire. Suffering was the hammer. And the men who survived were reshaped into something unbreakable. They reframed betrayal not as a wound, but as data. Instead of asking, "How could she do this to me?" they asked, "What does this teach me about reality?" That shift changed everything. Pain became information. Loss became education. What would destroy most men became the very thing that made them stronger. From there, they began building internal structures no one could take away. Daily rituals, physical training, mental discipline. These weren't dependent on love, validation, or outside approval. Meaning came from action, not from being needed. Purpose came from within, not from a promise whispered in the dark. And here's the paradox. The men who stopped needing women's loyalty became the only ones capable of inspiring it. But by that point, it didn't matter anymore. They had moved past the need. They had discovered something stronger than love's sovereignty. The forging process revealed something few men in comfort ever learn. True strength doesn't come from being loved. It comes from being complete without love. It doesn't come from being validated. It comes from being sufficient without validation. It doesn't come from being needed. It comes from needing nothing outside yourself to survive. The men who endured betrayal and rose from it developed what one survivor called the discipline of stone. Unmovable principles that nothing, not betrayal, not cold, not hunger, could erode. Wake at the same time every day, regardless of conditions. Train your body, no matter how weak or tired. Work on your craft, even if no one notices. Build, even if no one appreciates. These men became their own source of structure in a world designed to destroy structure. The lesson was brutal, but clear. Your mission must be stronger than your need for love. The men who survived best were the ones whose purpose transcended personal relationships. They lived for something greater than themselves, something that couldn't be taken away by betrayal or abandonment. That mission looked different for each man. For some, it was artistic, creating beauty even in hell. For others, it was intellectual, seeking truth in chaos. For others, still, it was spiritual, clinging to faith when everything else collapsed. And for some, it was practical, mastering a skill, building a discipline, refusing to let hardship erase progress. But whatever form it took, one rule applied. The mission had to be generated internally, not borrowed from anyone else. A man whose mission depends on a woman's approval is building on sand. A man whose purpose requires romantic love is fragile. A man who draws meaning from being needed has already given away his power. The camps made it clear only an internally generated purpose survives catastrophe. And that truth reaches far beyond Siberia. Because even in the modern world, every man will face storms. Job loss, sickness, rejection, betrayal. If your sense of worth depends on her loyalty, then her leaving will shatter you. But if your sense of worth comes from your mission, nothing can take it away. That doesn't mean rejecting women or living in isolation. It means putting first things first, establishing your mission before you establish your relationship, building meaning before you build romance, creating value inside yourself before expecting anyone else to value you. The mission is your North Star when all other lights go out, when loyalty fails, when love fades, when abandonment comes, your mission remains. And that's the anchor that allows a man to walk through any storm without drowning. When a man finally grasps this truth, something shifts. Betrayal stops being a wound that festers. It becomes information. Abandonment stops being a curse. It becomes clarity. The pain doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. It no longer controls you. That's the paradox most men miss. Accepting the limits of female loyalty doesn't make you weaker. It makes you free. When you stop expecting unconditional love, you stop being crushed when it doesn't appear. When you accept that loyalty has limits, you stop being surprised when those limits are reached. This shift changes how you see relationships. You stop trying to buy loyalty with sacrifice. You stop believing that enough effort will guarantee devotion. You stop telling yourself your love story is special, that your woman is different, that your bond will somehow escape the laws of nature. Instead, you learn to appreciate loyalty while it's there without needing it to last forever. You enjoy love while it exists without demanding permanence. You value what women bring without tying your survival to it. The men who carried this mindset out of the camps had an advantage most men never get. They saw loyalty as a gift, not a guarantee. They could cherish it while it lasted, but they didn't collapse when it vanished. That was the essence of strength. Sovereignty. Because once you stop needing loyalty, you become capable of truly appreciating it. Once you stop demanding love, you can finally enjoy it. And when you stop tying your purpose to someone else's presence, you gain something most men never taste: psychological freedom. This isn't isolation. It isn't bitterness. It's the ability to stand complete on your own, while still choosing to connect. It's loving because you want to, not because you have to. It's appreciating her presence without fearing her absence. That's the liberation men in comfort rarely find. And that's the path waiting for you. If you're willing to let go of illusions and face reality head-on. The men who mastered this mindset discovered something extraordinary. They realized that catastrophe could become curriculum. Betrayal could become education. Loss could become the spark for rebirth. They stopped asking, "Why did she do this to me?" and started asking, "What is this teaching me about reality?" That question changed everything. Instead of being crushed by disillusionment, they were sharpened by it. They used pain as a tool. They used abandonment as training. They forged resilience where others broke. This wasn't blind optimism. It wasn't pretending that betrayal didn't hurt. It was taking the hurt and channeling it into strength. When the wife left, they didn't numb the pain. They studied it. When loyalty failed, they didn't collapse. They built systems that no loyalty could shake. Every scar became a reminder of reality's rules. Every wound became proof that they could survive worse and rise again. And here's the most powerful lesson. Once you stop needing loyalty, you become immune to betrayal. Once you stop demanding unconditional love, you stop being destroyed when it ends. You transform from a man who clings to bonds into a man who creates meaning from within. That's when relationships change. You no longer approach women from need, but from choice. You're not desperate for devotion. You're open to connection. You're not building your life on the shaky ground of someone else's promises. You're building it on bedrock: your mission, your sovereignty, your strength. And that's the kind of man women truly respect, not because he begs for loyalty, but because he doesn't need it. Not because he demands devotion, but because he inspires it while standing complete without it. So here's your choice. You can keep clinging to illusions, hoping your story will be different. Or you can face reality and build yourself into a man no betrayal can break. The kind of man who loves freely, but never needs love to survive. The kind of man who values loyalty, but doesn't collapse when it's gone. If you're ready for that transformation, stay with me, because the journey doesn't end here. It begins here. Thank you for watching. If this message hit you, don't just scroll away. Subscribe, dive deeper into our content, and start building the mindset that puts you back in control. Drop a comment below. What's the biggest struggle you want us to break down next? Let's build a brotherhood of men who rise above confusion and reclaim their power. See you in the next video.